Hello, friends. Today I'm going to share with you one of the greatest true survival stories in human history. The date was 4th November 1914. The British ship Endurance was sailing across the violent seas of the South Atlantic, heading towards the most mysterious continent on Earth, Antarctica. On board were 28 brave men, led by the famous explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton. Shackleton had a dream no one had ever achieved: to walk across the entire continent of Antarctica on foot. Think about it. No smartphones, no GPS, no satellite radios. Temperatures as low as -50 degrees Celsius. An entire continent covered in ice and storms. Yet, Shackleton believed he could march 2,900 kilometers across Antarctica, from the Weddell Sea, past the South Pole, to the Ross Sea. But nature had a different plan. On 5th November 1914, the Endurance reached the last human settlement on their route, a whaling station on South Georgia Island. Beyond this point, there would be no towns, no ships, and no people for thousands of kilometers. Experienced sailors warned Shackleton, "Don't go. The Weddell Sea is dangerous this year. Ice is too thick." But Shackleton refused to delay. He pushed forward. 1 month later, on 5th December 1914, the Endurance entered the Weddell Sea. Within days, their biggest fear became reality. The ice was thicker and denser than anyone expected. Still, Shackleton ordered the ship to push ahead. But on 18th January 1915, the Endurance became completely trapped in the frozen sea. Locked in place, unable to move even an inch. The crew tried everything: running the engines at full power, cutting ice with tools, searching for cracks in the ice. Nothing worked. The mighty Endurance was stuck and drifting further away from land. Shackleton planned to land at Russell Bay, but now the ship was drifting away. 60 miles, then 70, then more. Antarctica's winter was arriving, bringing 24 hours darkness and temperatures far below freezing. The men spent months trapped in the ship, waiting for the ice to break. Photographer Frank Hurley captured haunting images. The ship surrounded, crushed by towers of ice. By September 1915, cracks began to appear in the ship's wooden frame. Then, on 24th October 1915, disaster struck. A massive sheet of ice slammed into the ship and the hull cracked open. Freezing water rushed in. The crew pumped water continuously for 72 hours. They fought bravely, but the ice was stronger. Finally, Shackleton gave the order no explorer wants to give: abandon ship. They gathered supplies, sledges, 3 lifeboats, and whatever food they could save. A crew member whispered in fear, "We will never see home again." They had no radio, no contact with the world, and no way to call for help. Their home was now a floating block of ice in the middle of the Antarctic Ocean. With only 1 month of food left, the men set up a temporary camp on the ice, later named Ocean Camp. Nights were brutal. Most men slept directly on the ice to avoid freezing winds. To survive long-term, Shackleton ordered extreme measures. Everyone could carry only 2 pounds of personal items. Shackleton himself left behind gold coins and even his Bible. Frank Hurley selected only 150 photo negatives out of 400. Food became so scarce that their sledge dogs, once beloved companions, had to be killed for meat. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The ice sheet floated endlessly, dragging them deeper into the frozen wilderness. On 21st November 1915, the Endurance finally broke apart and sank beneath the ice before their crew's eyes. The last connection to civilization disappeared. By early 1916, the men had been on ice for over a year. Shackleton needed land, solid land, or they would die. He aimed for Cape Pollet Island, 550 kilometers away. But the ice moved in the wrong direction. They drifted past their target, then past another island, and another. By March 1916, they realized they were floating towards the Drake Passage, the deadliest sea in the world. If they reached it, they would all die. Food was barely enough. To get water, men melted ice by holding cans close to their bare bodies. Some could collect only a few tablespoons at a time. One crew member, Blackborough, had secretly boarded the ship back in Britain. Shackleton had warned him jokingly, "If we run out of food, you'll be the first one we eat." Luckily, that never happened. They hunted seals, penguins, and even a sea leopard, gaining precious calories. But the ice beneath them was shrinking. Cracks appeared. The ice sheet was now only 50 meters long. Shackleton had no choice. They launched their 3 boats and headed towards the last reachable land, Elephant Island. After battling freezing waves, dodging icebergs, and rowing for 5 brutal days, the crew finally touched solid ground on 15th April 1916. For the first time in 497 days, their feet stood on land. A crew member wrote, "After hell, this lifeless island felt like heaven." But the island was completely uninhabited. No people, no food, no ships, no hope of rescue. If they stayed here, they would eventually starve. Shackleton needed to save his men, and he knew the only chance was to sail for help. He had 3 options: Cape Horn, 800 kilometers away, Falkland Islands, 880 kilometers away, and South Georgia Island, 1,300 kilometers away. Options 1 and 2 were closer, but required crossing the deadly Drake Passage. So, Shackleton chose the longest route, but the safest winds, South Georgia. On 24th April 1916, Shackleton handpicked 5 of his strongest men and boarded a small 7-meter lifeboat named James Caird. To reach South Georgia, they had to cross the world's roughest waters. 12-meter high waves, freezing temperatures, constant storms. Only 4 hours rowing, 4 hours resting. Barely enough space to lie down. Every mistake meant death. They battled murderous waves, icy winds, seasickness, and total exhaustion. Some days they couldn't even see the sky. Without sunlight, navigation became impossible. Shackleton's confidence began to break. Even he felt fear and frustration overtaking him. One day, a bird circled their boat. Shackleton, filled with rage and stress, actually yelled at it. But after 16 days of torture, they finally spotted South Georgia Island, just 3 miles away. Before they could celebrate, a violent storm hit. The waves tossed their tiny boat like a toy. They lost control. They gave up rowing and waited for death. But somehow, hours later, the storm passed. The clouds lifted. South Georgia lay ahead, 1 mile away. With their last ounce of strength, they paddled through roaring waves and crawled onto the island's beach on 15th May 1916. They had done the impossible. But the journey wasn't over yet. They had landed on the wrong side of the island. The whaling stations were on the other side. Across mountains, cliffs, and glaciers no human had ever crossed. Shackleton and 2 men walked non-stop for 36 hours without sleep through freezing storms and deadly terrain. Finally, they saw smoke from a whaling station. Shackleton walked in, covered in ice, looking like a ghost, and asked, "Do you know me? My name is Shackleton." Tears rolled down the whaler's eyes. The world had assumed Shackleton and his crew were dead. Shackleton immediately sent ships to rescue the 22 men waiting on Elephant Island. But storms blocked the first ship. Ice blocked the second. The third couldn't get close. Months passed. But on 30th August 1916, after 4 attempts, Shackleton finally returned to Elephant Island. He shouted from the ship, "Are you all well?" The reply came, "All safe, all well." Not a single man had died.